All right, hello and welcome. My name is Mitch Guthrie, and this is The Long Letter, and today my guest is Charles. Charles, say hi.
Hello.
Charles, you work for Gather?
Yes,
correct?
I do.
Okay. Can you, just give a quick overview? What would you say you do here?
My title is I'm a recovery navigator, which is a new program that in this county where we take people who are kind of at the most acute level of interaction with law enforcement or mental health issues, and we kind of offer to help walk them through recovery, especially the early stages of recovery. So people who with these changes in the law, people aren't necessarily being arrested, and so this is kind of a.
Is that in relation to the Brady's Law,
right.
whatever it was? Or that decriminalized certain...
Blake?
Yeah.
Is that what it is? The Blake? And sorry, I don't know this stuff off the top of my head. But
I don't either. And when you say acute need, what
I mean, people who are, have some of the most serious, like people who would normally have been arrested, like on the street, right? And just people who have the most interaction with, in kind of, I don't want to say conflict, but, friction with community, we get a referral and we can go out and, make contact with them, do some outreach and try to guide them towards recovery, try to guide them into into services. And then we can link them up with all these other services. We can link them up with mental health, with housing, just the whole spectrum of services that are available that they may need, that they don't really have in their current state, that it's pretty difficult for them to navigate that on their own.
Like they need some hand holding to get through this process.
That's a mild way to put it. I mean, somebody who is in early recovery is just so, usually, they're traumatized. If they've quit using, then all of the stuff they've been self-medicating for is coming back, all their anxiety and depression and everything else. So, you're just in early recovery. It's a real delicate time. And so helping to walk them through that, because it's hard even for people who are quote unquote normal, because there's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of different systems they have to interface with, and that's very difficult. It's difficult even for people who are not in that situation. So, we try to be there to help as kind of a liaison or, just something to help them navigate that system. Recovery navigator. We can link them with services and also just, help them with logistics, getting them to their appointments, helping them with, some of the bills they need to pay just to keep things going.
Like the skill sets that they kind of lack where they find themselves right now.
Right.
You step in
or just impaired. They may not lack the skill sets necessarily, but in their current state, they're dormant.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
And so coordination is it sounds like almost kind of like the front door, first step in to the process.
Right.
And then you're facilitating within your program, you're facilitating within other programs that Gather and other services provide, correct?
Services that Gather and throughout the community.
Yeah.
So other mental health providers, crisis services, healthcare services, whatever somebody might need. We just tell them, it's like, what do you want to do? It's very open-ended. It's very voluntary. And we let them direct it.
And the voluntary part is a critical part of that.
Right. Because, the truth of it is you can't just strong arm people into recovery. You can't do it. As much as you could look at somebody and say, you really need to do this, they're going to come do it when that time is right for them.
It's most effective when it's non-coercive, when they're contributing, when they're a part of their recovery process.
They, especially people in addiction are very attuned to issues of autonomy. So you don't want to be taking that away. You want to give them as much autonomy as possible in this process. Otherwise, they're just, as soon as they kind of feel the yoke on them, they're going to bolt.
It's a very patient process.
It's extreme. Yes, it has to be.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? And that, that takes time. That means there's a lot of missed connections. There's a lot of things that, could possibly not go ideally well. I'm a guy who is in a lot of services. I used to work around surgical services, and things had to be just right, and they had to happen when they had to happen. And this is a radically different type of time frame.
Mm-hmm.
This is, things happen when they happen.
Yeah.
And tough.
Right. And that all is gonna, that's where you are now. This is where you find yourself. So we're going to take a step back and kind of start maybe at the beginning of your story here.
Right.
Last episode I talked to Brooke, who had just an incredible amount of trauma in her life, and all of that kind of led up to the work she's doing now here at Gather, as well as her recovery process herself and stuff. And so, starting with you, we'll go back kind of the same thing. Like, tell me a little bit about like your background, your childhood, a little bit about your upbringing.
I was a 70s kid, I guess. Fairly conventional family, north of Seattle, suburbia. It seems unremarkable, and that's part of the problem, is like thinking, well, it was so normal, what happened? But I was mom, dad, and I had a brother, and I delivered papers as a kid. I was in Boy Scouts, my childhood, it seemed like it is a different era, but it was just very conventional. I felt early on, a lot of tension. I felt a lot of depression from a very young age. And I remember that distinctly. Very sensitive kid. And I was also obese as a kid, so I had a lot of body shame from a very young age, and that kind of worked its way into everything. So,
so not necessarily, a story driven by some crazy home life, so much as just your, life.
Life and also just, being, there was friction. It wasn't the perfect home. There is no such thing, right? So there was definite friction in the home. I'll just say that. And I was very attuned to it. That's the thing. I guess I was a sensitive kid. I don't know how else to say that.
Very empathic.
Right. And so I didn't get why people acted like they act. And that's kind of like been one of the themes of my life. Is like, why do you do that? Why do you treat people like this? And that's just something I remember as a kid, like staring at the wall. I remember this one memory of that, just, very young, like elementary school, just going, well, why do we do anything? Why do we go to work? Why do we get out of bed? Why do we go to school? Why do we do any of this stuff? Mm-hmm. Just the whole system didn't make sense. So I really remember that, because I didn't like school, and then I worked. I started working when I was 9 years old, and it just all seemed like it was all just doing stuff just to keep people off my back. That's what life seemed
what
like.
People expected of you, or what?
Right. It seemed like there were all these expectations, and I just really, I didn't feel like I had a part in it. It just didn't feel like mine. It didn't feel like I had any ownership.
So, what you do today in terms of coordinating and navigating this process, you have your own history of substance use. And first of all, we had talked a little bit before, people have a different sort of drug of choice sort of thing that they either go to or fall to, or this is kind of their default standard. What was yours particularly?
Alcohol.
Right.
Right.
And so how did you find yourself in the state where what led up to you eventually realizing you needed help, or what led to, the circumstances surrounding kind of where you found alcohol as an escape or as or whatever.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, really, a lot of that tension that I felt and the kind of shame that I felt, and anxiety about life and depression, alcohol was great as a short-acting antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication, and that's kind of what it is. It's a very short-acting, and you get 15 minutes. And that's the way a lot of drugs are, and it just all of a sudden and this is a common theme. This is all of a sudden all that stuff didn't matter all that much. All that stuff that I felt, all of the friction and all that stuff didn't matter. And I had a new group of people to be with. I had my own crew to run with or whatever. And so it was a social escape. It was a psychological escape. It was a lot of things. And it, because as a kid, I couldn't sleep. As a little kid, I had insomnia. And so alcohol, that wasn't the first thing I really got into. I mean, in the early days, I was into marijuana, but marijuana started giving me anxiety. And it's like, well, why would I want to give myself anxiety? I'm not going to take a drug to make me anxious. So, I kind of settled on alcohol because it was, it was a relaxing drug. I liked the taste. And it was also everywhere. I mean, I could get it at the store. Mm-hmm. I wasn't running the chance of like getting busted getting it. And there's also this culture around alcohol of, it's the working man's thing. You can go to a tavern, you've worked your hard day and now you can reward yourself. And it kind of like let me feel like a normal middle-class Joe.
It doesn't quite have the same stigma as, say, like marijuana or whatever.
No, Budweiser and heroin, two different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Functionally a little different there.
Right.
But there's things I'm picking out of here that you're talking about. So like even the social aspect of it.
Right.
It sounds like you're kind of a guy that just whose mental engine's always running, always running scenarios, always running, whatever it is. And it brings on that kind of anxiety. It brings on a sort of, it's a stressor, just functioning. Right. And so, this group of people you find yourself with, is it sort of like a place where not only, I mean, obviously you can partake in drinking alcohol or whatever, but more importantly, like you're not functioning in that way necessarily. Did the social circle kind of give you space to chill out, or
yeah,
I don't even know
absolutely. I mean, it gave me space to kind of express myself, how I wanted to. I can be pretty boisterous, pretty loud, a little bit nutty, and I didn't know how to fit that in other places,
It kind of give you space to express yourself differently than
or however, not necessarily just being flippant about it, but just like being yourself. It was kind of the first time I'd been able to like feel like I was being myself, like I wasn't. Nobody was looking down. Nobody had their thumb on me saying, you got to be this way. Mm-hmm. And because I don't. You could say I'm kind of a corporate guy, but when it comes to certain things, it's like I keep people at arm's length.
And these can coexist in the same person.
Right.
It's not like I myself have a tendency to be pretty extroverted. I like talking and chatting, but then I also can be extremely introverted where I've had enough of people. I've had, so I totally understand the idea of, you like things in a particular order, but you also don't want, like you said, somebody's thumb on you. And you found a community, you found, a group of friends or whatever that let you not have to worry about, how you're expressing yourself necessarily.
Right.
So, as these things go, they're typically not just like one day you're normal, next day you're struggling with this thing. It's a process you kind of fall into. Did you find yourself doing that, or?
I knew that I kind of knew all along I was self-medicating. I mean, that was obvious to me. I wasn't, all of a sudden I was having fun, and then I thought I might have a problem. It's like, no, from fairly early on, it's like I'm self-medicating. I'm miserable. And I drank a lot. I'm a big guy. I can drink a lot. And so, and that just day to day living like that can have its, effect. So I didn't have a lot of illusion about, not being an alcoholic.
It's not like you were in denial and it just snuck up on you, and then you're like one day, oh, holy cow, I need help. It's more of a
right. And, and I started seeking, counseling in my mid-20s and, antidepressants and other things, which you can't really do antidepressants while you're drinking, So, but the thing is, alcoholism changes over time. It doesn't stay the same. Within me, it didn't. Back then I could quit drinking, and then if I stopped drinking for a few days, I was fine. In my late stages of alcoholism, within a couple hours of quitting drinking, I'm sweating and sick. It's tissue dependency.
Right. And the DT, the tremors.
Yeah, I haven't gotten quite to that level yet, but it's the really bad, physical addiction.
Right. Which, I mean, I don't know if a lot of people recognize it, but alcohol is a drug that could kill you if you do not come off it carefully or under supervision, sort of thing.
Right. It's seizures. I mean, you can go into seizure if you cease intake too rapidly without replacing it with benzo or some. If you don't go through a medicated assisted withdrawal, then you could have problems. I've done it a bunch of times. I don't recommend it, but it can kill you, right?
Mm-hmm. So,
and I've known two guys who died of it.
Yeah,
died in withdrawal.
Were they friends of yours or people that you just know in struggles?
Right, friends of mine. Right.
So, I ask this only because it's one way of trying to capture this idea, but just like, you knew that you were self-medicating, you're aware of what you're doing due to the nature of just wanting to shut off that brain or shut off that process, or dull it, whatever. Mm-hmm. Was there a point where you had sort of a low point or I can't keep doing this?
It seems like there's been a bunch of those. I mean, I'd managed through most of my alcoholism to keep it under, well, I wouldn't say under wraps, but it didn't trash my life. It didn't blow everything up. At one point I had bariatric surgery in October of 2012. And after that, the alcoholism changed. And they say now it's like 20% of people who have the kind of surgery I had end up having, physical dependence upon alcohol. It takes away one of the barriers of absorption and it just basically shoots the stuff through your system. You stay drunk longer, you get drunk quicker, all this kind of stuff. And so it really changed. That's when I became like physically, addicted. And I was reversing some of the weight loss that I had from the surgery. And that was kind of like, well, I went through all this stuff to do this, and I'm going to blow it on booze. That was when I first said, look, that was like a functional or more of an intellectual low point. There's been other low points which are more spiritual, but that was like, man, I have to address this. you know.
Yeah, one recurring theme I'm kind of picking out here is you've been this entire time, even, childhood on through, you're very cerebral of your processes. It's not like something's catching you unaware. It's more like, well, these are my options. I'm choosing this option because of this stress I have, this, inner dialogue that's always going on or whatever it is.
Right.
And I think like you strike me like my wife will tease me sometimes because she'll call me a pessimist. Right. I'll joke about being I'm a realist, or whatever the thing is. But the truth is, I have a tendency to lean more toward like say being a curmudgeon than I do toward being some like super hopeful like dude.
Awesome. I like that. I can relate to that.
And that's what as I've known you, like you're not a negative personality. You're just more of a waiting for the other shoe to drop sort of person.
Yeah, and that's painful because I realize that. I don't like that. I don't like that about myself. I don't like that people see that. I know they do, and I don't put that on them. But I wish I could be more of a, you know what I mean?
Well, and that goes back to what we said earlier. We're more than just one thing. You're not completely curmudgeon-y.
Right.
And neither am I. My wife,
curmudgeon-y, I like that.
We've joked about Richard Beck. He's a writer. He kind of comments on winter Christians versus summer Christians. And if you were going to split people there, I would probably fall under kind of a winter Christian.
Right.
We're on maybe the Garden of Gethsemane side of the cross, and my wife is something more of a summer Christian, where she's just kind of a naturally joyful person.
Right.
She's happy. These aren't bad things. It's when it becomes your entire personality, or when you can't see the goodness. I mean, there's been times like you're a musician, you're in a band. Like you genuinely have fun with that. That's not you doing something because it's I gotta do something.
Right.
So you're more than one thing, just like I am. But I do say, I think we share that sort of tendency to see a little bit more of, like I said, the other shoe to drop in a situation.
I think part of that comes from, like I said, the body shame growing up, big kid is like physically being around in places and stuff is kind of a liability. That's what it feels like. It feels like if I'm out there, I might have to take some garbage from somebody, or something's going to happen, or something's not going to be right. So there's that residual kind of response inside of me just to like, not want to be there.
Yeah.
I have to talk myself into everything, even things that I wanted to do, that I planned forever. I don't know if you know how that is. You know what I mean? It's
I'm the same way. Sometimes I have to talk myself up, going where I know there's going to be a lot of people. Right. And I don't know if like me, what ends up happening, I go and I just like,
great time.
I open up like you wouldn't believe, almost too much, where, let's put a little bit more Mitch back in the box there.
Yeah.
But no, I totally understand that predilection, if you will.
Right.
And I that's why I feel like I just have tons of sympathy for that inner dialogue, because as a kid myself, I also had that thing where I'd have like a conversation with friends, and then later by myself, I'd be replaying that conversation.
Ooh, yeah.
I'd be going through that. I would, and I see these traits. I got 4 boys. I see these traits in my kids sometimes, and I'm like, I don't want them to struggle the way that I struggled with some of this stuff. And I'm not saying that it's some all-encompassing thing. I'm just saying that we have these tendencies to kind of replay a scenario. We have a tendency to think, what if I had said this or done this differently?
And, something that was useful to me when I heard that, there's a term for that. They call it ruminative thinking. That's an actual psychological term. I mean, it's something that they'll put in your file. This person has a lot of ruminative thinking. They just roll through stuff over and over again. It's been helpful kind of to realize it's like, okay, that's a behavior that's not necessarily.
Yeah, isn't it crazy what having a term for something, it doesn't change anything. You still have those, but that knowing other people have it, knowing that the experience is not just like something stuck in your head.
I'm not a freak.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes a long way toward, okay, this is normal to a certain degree. and it kind of help you put that in a box if you need to or whatever.
Right.
So back to your story here. How many times had you attempted recovery from your alcoholism?
I tried to quit a handful of times, before I really got serious about it, really almost 10 years ago now. I tried to quit only a handful of times. I was never, once I went a little over a year. But I just didn't view it as recovery. It's like, I'll just stop drinking.
Right.
And everything will be great. And that didn't
Narrator.
that
It
didn't
was
happen.
not great.
That didn't happen, so it just, I didn't have any, I didn't have a church community, or I didn't have recovery community. I didn't have anything like that. None of my friends were quitting drinking, and so I didn't have any framework to be in. It was just like, I'll just quit drinking, because of health reasons or whatever. Of course, if you're drinking 12 plus beers a night, health reasons,
you need to stop this.
Yes.
And I totally understand your thought process here is, I can do it. I got it.
Right.
I'll take care of it.
Right. But, I just didn't see it. There was not an urgency to it. There wasn't like, you have to do this. It was just like, I'm tired of this. It felt more like, I'm just not going to do this. It wasn't like a necessity that I quit.
Right. So in this process, you go it alone. You see some success there until your surgery kind of changes your metabolism,
right.
response to alcohol. So, we had talked, you've been through a few programs that you eventually found. Mm-hmm. Some, it sounds like were faith-based programs.
Right.
Some were not.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? Okay. Detail that, like walk through like that experience for you.
Well, I mean, I just, starting recovery kind of coincided with me, going back to church. I'd gone to church as a little kid. And so I started going to church again, because something that, going to church, something that I kind of always viewed as a problem was, a lack of meaning. That was always an issue with me, and a lack of self-worth. And so I was, I needed something that gave me some kind of self-worth. And so that's where the Christianity came in. And, that there is, that we all have worth and dignity, inherent. And so that was, kind of went hand in hand with recovery, starting in like 2012, 2013 was, finding a faith community, finding recovery community, maybe a faith-based recovery community, and just, and then starting music again, because I hadn't played music in like 10 years, and I completely changed how I play, because, I'm playing worship songs, never played worship songs before, and being around all kinds of different people, way different people. I'd never been in a recovery community, and all of a sudden I'm around, it's like I'd had this group of friends who was like a bunch of middle-class alcoholics, and now I'm around all kinds of people,
all over the strata,
right? All over the economic spectrum and the drug spectrum and whatever else. And so that was like kind of a culture shock, but it was like it was good.
Did you find this all in one church? Did you find this?
No.
Churches? I would imagine there's some churches that have a very I'll say hands-off approach to things like that.
Right. And that's an issue, because I would go to one church and they would have like a Celebrate Recovery program, then it would get shut down. Well, where does everybody go when a program like that shuts down? They may only go to that certain meeting. They ended up there because that's where they wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And so they're not necessarily going over across town to the other one. And so this happened, a few times. And, during this stuff, I was, still kind of struggling on and off, working through relapse and stuff, and going in and out of treatment. And eventually, it got to the point where, I came out of my first inpatient treatment. I quit my job of 18 years within like a month and a half. And, I was going to remake my life. Don't do that. So
that's what this podcast is for me. I'm just remaking my life.
Well,
I hope you know that.
There's a reason they say don't make major life decisions in early recovery. And that's, you have to make certain major life decisions in early recovery, but don't take away your income source and your medical coverage.
Don't destabilize yourself.
Right. Don't completely trash your life. So, needless to say, the remake didn't take.
But the idea behind it, though,
right.
was, all right, I'm just going to get a new start.
Yeah, I've got this new lease on life, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I'm clean and sober. I'm gonna, remake myself as what I,
but
what my current idea of what I should be is.
Unknowingly sabotaging your efforts a little bit there in terms of, destabilizing while you're trying to do that.
Right. So, that all failed, and just the shame in that was just overwhelming, and that kind of set off a few years of just a cycle. So I found I was in a couple different residential faith-based programs, and some were better than others, but I want to do something. I have a lot of skills. I like to be in leadership. I like to do projects. There's things I like to do. And if you're going to tell me, you're in recovery, just concentrate on recovery, you can't do any of this other stuff. It's like, what do I do?
Right.
It's like, okay. And you just have to learn how to be patient. It's like, good luck, I would always run up against these ideas of how you should be approaching your recovery,
So it's not just some programs will try to give you just the space to work on your recovery, and you're looking for not just recovery, but what am I going to do going forward? How do I exercise the other parts of myself?
Right.
Not just recovery, obviously being the most important in terms of what you needed, but it doesn't exist in a vacuum.
No, and it's intertwined with everything else. So it can't exist in a vacuum. I mean, you have to be, because if all I'm doing is concentrate on the fact that I'm an alcoholic in recovery, that's not very satisfying, and it's just there's not a lot to work with there as far as I'm concerned. Because there's a lot more to life. There's other things I can bring to recovery from other areas.
Right. It's not holistic.
Right.
It's just this one, part of you, which is obviously important, and that's why you're there. But you don't exist in a vacuum. You've got you have things you want to do, skills you want to build. So you go through these. You found some more effective than others. You had some setbacks. And this is where, this is the first time I've heard you kind of throw out the term stigma,
right?
In terms of that. And so where do you find success? Where would you say what program fit kind of how you
I mean, and I hesitate, I hesitate to use word program or system or anything like that, but just, what did I find that worked, is finding the right people, really.
This is a recurring theme in all of these conversations I've had about the importance of, and I'm going to say surrogate family, but it's so critical to a person's ability to overcome these challenges, overcome these things, that they have a support system. And a lot of times, that support system isn't their direct family. Family comes with a lot of baggage, a lot of emotional stuff sometimes. And so sometimes it's healthier to find something outside of that. But it sounds like I mean, you can't just make a family and be like, okay, here you go, you're part of that, right?
Right.
And so you're saying that the type of community that you ended up in was a significant indicator of your success.
Yeah.
In that.
Yeah. I'm around people where I don't have to explain myself. I don't have any desire to ask them to explain themselves. We all get it. That's a real simple way to put it. We all get it.
Do you find the same stigma in this community that you're a part of? Or does it play out differently, not as a stigma, but more as a recognition that we're all in the same boat? Or
as far as stigma goes in this community, in the larger community, against like people in recovery, or
the kind of surrogate family that worked for you, the community you got plugged into,
right?
Obviously failures happen,
right?
How is the response different than, say, your previous?
Well, I was just thinking about this morning, just before I came here, actually, about how one of the things I love is when somebody comes up to me and say, "Hey, man, I just used," and it's like, cool, thanks for telling me that, that you're not scared and running away from me.
Avoiding you.
Right. You're not ditching me now. You're not like leaving town. You're not getting lost for 5 days. You're saying this happened last night, whatever. It's like, and part of me is like, hey, don't do that. The other side of me is like, thank you for telling me, and thanks for coming in.
And that's a hard line to walk, I would imagine.
Well, it's kind of what you got to do. Otherwise people run.
People need to know that they're safe telling you that they've failed.
They've failed, and because they feel the stigma, and that was really, when I was kind of looking at the questions earlier, I was like, stigma has been a big part of my life. It's like I've surfed from one stigma to another throughout my life, and so my response has been to run or to self-medicate or do whatever. So it's kind of like stigma is part of, my response to that has kind of shaped me. It's part of who I am, for better or worse. So like, I don't feel any stigma like within, this recovery community, therapy community, whatever you want to call it. I just know people get it. I don't worry about the people around. I know they have my back. I just know it. They're the last thing I worry about is like, what are they going to do? What are they going to say? Are they going to trash me or whatever? And it's like, no, I know they get it.
And safety is such an important part of that relationship. Right. So let's talk about that, because you kind of got to the point of the larger community as a whole, which, these interviews started out as kind of discussing some of the fallout from how people talked about those dealing with homelessness, those dealing with substance use disorders. You found a community within a community that supports you, that gives you safe space, that wants the best for you. You don't have to run, you don't have to hide. Right. What's your response to the larger community when you see these meetings that happen, the big meeting that we had here about the encampments, as well as this idea of, a hand up, not a handout, or whatever, like that was a recurring theme.
Right.
Like, how does that make you feel? What do you think on that? What are your thoughts, like, moving forward with that sort of verbiage out there?
Well, I mean, first of all, we have a serious housing shortage in this community, and actually all across this country. So nothing's going to change. It's only going to get worse. And it's with that attitude, with the attitude of, hey, people have to do something before they get anything. It's like, you don't have anything to give. Right now it's like, I remember they were saying, well, we want to get people, we want these services to get people in a pipeline to get them to do things and have responsibility, to get stuff. It's like, you don't have any stuff to give. You don't have a roof to put over their head. There is none. So I hate to get a little nasty about it, but I mean, that's, to me, that's kind of the one part of my job I really despise, is the fact that I look at people and go, I wish I could just get you in somewhere. I wish I could get a roof over your head.
I wish I could help you. I wish I could.
I wish I could. I mean, and and there's not, and it's demoralizing to me. So I just don't think any of the things they were talking about as far as a hand up. It's like, well, you give a hand up to somebody who's, sleeping in their car, if they're lucky to have a car.
Right.
The whole thing was just, there was a radical disconnect there. It just didn't make sense to me.
And this is like, I have to remind myself as I look at this stuff, there is a certain logic that they're using. I understand it. I also understand that if you're going to go, like, there's some stuff that, I'm going to call falls under common sense.
Right. Absolutely.
Where, yeah, on the face value, this does make sense. I don't have any ill will toward people that are kind of operating the space unless they should know better.
Right.
And I don't have ill will regardless, but I can understand the thinking behind it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What I struggle with and what I, was the sort of dehumanization that came with it, that piggybacks on it. It's this sort of, those people type comments and.
Right. And, like, just to piggyback on what you said there is, I get it. I get the frustration. I deal with these folks face to face, and I understand the frustration with and it's, members of the community don't like this kind of visual representation of decline in their community. That's just it's frustrating. But we have basically a market failure in our society. We're not building affordable housing for whatever reason. We're not doing it. And then people go, oh, why do these McDonald workers want, $15 an hour? It's like, that won't get them anything.
Like a 1-bedroom apartment is crazy expensive.
That won't get them anything. It's like there is no place for them to be. And that's the dehumanizing thing to me, is like basically telling people there is nowhere for you to be. Because I felt that a little bit. I remember walking around kind of at my physical rock bottom, walking around 196 up in Linwood in the pouring rain in like February, and being surrounded by cars, and I'm out there in like an army jacket, just soaked. And I was like, this is no place for a human being to be. This is a street, and I'm not supposed to be here. I have nowhere to go. And that comes home. I mean, you feel that. And so, yeah, the dehumanization, it's just, because what, I guess the other side of the dehumanization I want to ask is like, well, what do you want to do? What do you want them to do? Well, they should go out and get a job, or they should do this, or they should do that. It's like, talk to them, and they just don't understand, all the barriers and all the stuff that people go through. And plus a lot of these folks that are out there are, I think everybody could agree that a certain portion of society, has serious mental health issues. You could say there's a certain ratio or whatever percentage it is. Why wouldn't it be likely that that's what you're seeing? You're seeing a lot of the people who have just not, for whatever reason, have just fallen through the cracks, have not been welcome wherever they go from. They've suffered through intergenerational abuse, intergenerational stigma, intergenerational poverty, because this life, like you said, it's about finding the right people. If you're not around the right people for whatever reason, things don't go well.
And it's difficult because, as you're saying, even if you find the right people, like the community that is trying to develop these, I mean, it breaks your heart. You don't know where to send them. You don't know. You don't
Right.
have the resources. We're flat up short on this stuff.
Right.
And I think you talked about it. People don't like to see this. Like, it's very visible. There's homeless people,
Camps, garbage,
sleeping on the sidewalk.
There's all these signs of decline.
And I think I think about that a lot when we're so used to having things taken away or not visible. And I think of there was one time for whatever reason, I think it was snow or something, but like our garbage service wasn't working for a week or two. You know how much garbage you accrue if we had to keep that with us? If it didn't just go into some truck and go far away, right?
Mm-hmm.
We would have to think differently
about how you consume,
about how we consume and how we live. We would have to really start thinking and being more cognizant of these things. And I think there's so much hidden structurally that's starting to kind of like burst at the seams here when it comes to housing, when it comes to mental health, when it comes to addiction and stuff like that, that people don't, we're not, for whatever reason, our country right now and other places, it's like a machine just churning out broken people.
It's churning out broken people, and it's also eating away at the margins. There is no, there's not a lot of wiggle room left in it.
Yeah,
I guess is what I could say. I feel bad for kids. I remember as a young person, for me, when I was, getting out there on my own, I could go find a cheap room. I could go, I could live fairly cheaply. I could put a roof over my head for fairly cheaply. I don't know where kids are going now.
And it's not like their job prospects are all of a sudden they're making
that much
way more
better.
money. Yeah.
Right. So, and here we are in between two of the most expensive cities in America, Portland and Seattle. And it's really, it's a pickle. I don't know how to get out of this.
Right. And I think that is the difficult thing. The people that are upset about this also don't necessarily have any more authority to just go build houses or whatever.
Right.
It's a societal thing. It's a, multiple parties involved to make this stuff work.
Right.
And so there are no easy answers. And that's why, we have to kind of step back and, okay, what are we doing? Or what can I do?
Right.
That's simple. And sometimes, like you said, it's just as simple as giving space to somebody who is in addiction or struggling even with mental health issues, kind of keeping that humanity in there.
Right.
As part of the equation.
And they get that. These folks get that. I mean, when somebody just gives to them without, expectation and treats them like a human being and shows them dignity and respect and all these other things, they eat it up.
And this is you're not talking about giving, we're just giving them tons of money or whatever. No, we're talking about like basic necessities.
A sandwich.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Goes a long way.
Right. A lot of this stuff, it's very simple stuff. And just talking to them, making eye contact, and just not being a jerk. Yeah.
Yeah. Just looking people in the eye, not necessarily crossing the street when they're there,
Right.
And I get, there's conditions that can be disturbing if you haven't been around them.
Right.
I think
absolutely.
Schizoaffective disorder.
Yep.
The behavior's so odd that you're not quite sure. And what I found over the years of being around more and more people dealing with that is you just get comfortable with, you get kind of a higher threshold of what you consider weird.
Right.
And oftentimes talking to them helps ground them. It brings them back to, just something as simple as that. We have somebody at the church that visits sometimes, and she can really get on a tangent and really get way out there. And I'd be like, well, hey, how are you doing here? And we found out, we've learned more about her family history.
Right.
She's talked about her daughter, all this stuff that kind of brings her back a little bit. Mm-hmm. So yeah, she's weird and odd, and she gets really angry.
Right.
But it's really a manageable thing in terms of like how you can work with that person to a certain degree.
Right.
I mean, she needs help. She needs medication, and that's part of that. But as individuals, what we can do is really easy. It's not crazy.
Yeah,
you know?
it's not rocket science. Like, do I have the training to like be patient with somebody?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah.
Maybe. What it takes is like, you know, getting the voice inside of me to kind of like shut off and say, okay, I'm just going to be there.
Yeah.
You know, and it takes that a lot, because, you know, you hear a lot of stuff, like you said, you know, people say odd things, and it's like, what do I say about that? It's like, nothing. I mean,
You just
it is what it is. That's the noise of the system.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So going back to you personally, your experience, the different programs you've been through, you've been in recovery now for how long?
Well, you know, like, as when I started like really trying to get sober, like, I've been working at it for almost 10 years. Right. Yeah.
And what keeps you in recovery today?
Well, I mean, the alternative stinks.
Right.
You know, so, you know, there's part of that. It's like, I've gotten to the point where, you know, my alcoholism is severe enough to where it's pretty unmanageable and it's impossible when it takes effect. You know, the other things that keep me in recovery are that just, it's, you know, I kind of like my life now. I like the people I'm around. I like the work I do, even though it's really hard and strange and frustrating and, you know, sometimes demoralizing, but I like it, you know? So, you know, I like my life. I've had to make a lot of changes and work things out and, you know, find people and guess what? I'm there. You know, every once in a while it kind of hits me. It's like, hey, I found it. I found what I always wanted. I found community. I found meaning. You know, I'm able to do things that you know are impactful. I am able to use my talent. I'm able to do all this stuff. It's like, well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You know, you know, it's like I should be jumping up and down, saying, yay, yay, yay. You know, this is really cool.
And did you know you had found it earlier, or do you look back and go, oh my goodness, like this is...
No, because it's what it was is it's this could sound, well, no, it won't sound strange. You know, this place, it's a challenge at times. So I still have in my head that, you know, I am going to be, you know, my life, to be successful, it has to have like some earmarks of a conventional middle class, prosperous existence. And that's kind of not where I am. I mean, it doesn't feel like that. You know, some of the things I'm dealing with, it certainly doesn't feel like that.
So your idea of what you thought it would be and what it ended up being.
And what it ended up being were radically different. So I'd kind of go, you know, because I had this idea of like, oh, you know, I'm going to be, you know, doing the work I was doing before, and I was going to have that kind of prestige or do this or whatever. And I had to kind of just go, look, you know, none of that stuff was that cool. You know, it wasn't that great. What I have now is worth so much more. And so giving up on an idea, basically, an idea of what life should be, what success means, what, you know, relationships mean, what I mean, giving up on a lot of these ideas that were really kind of created to make me, you know, impressed with myself or make other people impressed with me. That's, you know, I had to give up on a lot of that stuff.
And maybe like give up. It's not so much give up, but recognize that this is, it's found other places.
Right.
Because I see you now. I see how you interact with the office staff. I see what you're doing. And I don't get the feeling that you're sitting here being like, I had to give up on all this. For what I see is you found something that actually works.
Right. Right. You know, even though at times it's, well, like, no matter what you do, I mean, there's frustration in every job, in every environment. There is, you know, there's there's hiccups.
Welcome to life.
Right. Yeah. And that's really kind of important. It just coming to, part of giving up on some of these ideas is giving up on the idea of like perfection is out there to be achieved, and it's going to be really sleek, and it's going to have a nice leather case, and it's going to be, matching and all these things. No, it's like life is what life is, and it's very rich and very complex, and at times, perturbing. But yeah, there's other places for, satisfaction and I found what works. I feel as comfortable as I can given the circumstances, because like I said, sometimes it's just like, still something will come up where it's like, how in the earth am I going to deal with this? How am I going to deal with this situation? I don't know, and some of these situations are, it's not something I came up with. It's a client or it's somebody out there in the community, and I have to deal with their absolutely impossible situation and kind of, bring light to it. And it's like, how am I going to do that? That's a challenge. And so, as much as I like being part of this, and as much as I love this community, it's still sometimes it throws real big curveballs at me that are just, they take every bit of my, spiritual energy to deal with.
But they're worth it.
They're worth it, and because they are. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not me. You know what I mean? It's like this is other people. This is their struggle. Well, it's my struggle too, but.
And that's right there,
right.
The critical part.
Right.
The family that you find that lets you be you.
Right.
And warts and all or whatever, they carry your struggle with you. And now you are in a position where it's your struggle now too, for those that you're trying to help. It's not, there's no like wall of, well, that's your problem, whatever. You're taking that on a little bit to help to
right.
do this. And with that comes the dangerous, scary part of it, which is it can hurt, it can frustrate you, it can stymie you.
And of course, we have to, I have to have some kind of boundary. There has to be, at some point where it's like, well, look, this is me. I have my life, and so there's a certain amount of safety you need to have in it. But yeah, and that's why I'm saying, things like a lack of housing really hurts. It's like when I can't, like, something real basic about humanity. It's like, can I get a roof over your head? No. That hurts. It's a background pain that's constant when I deal with anybody. They say,
here's your job. We don't have the resources for you to fulfill it. All these things.
It's not just we. It's like society, for some reason, the capitalist system, and I've defended it, but we're in this market failure right now where it's like we don't have a supply. We don't have any way to work through this, and so, something has to be done. And it's like, how do we move market forces? And I don't see anybody really talking about it. That we're 7 million housing units short in this country. I don't really hear anybody talking about. I don't hear any politicians talking about that. I hear them talking about cleaning up the camps.
Yeah. Yeah. These are intractable problems, in the sense of, no one person, organization, whatever can solve it. We're obviously in a world of hurt right now, and that's going to continue. Something has to be done differently. But I appreciate you sharing your story. I appreciate you being just open and honest. I feel like I have a real kinship with you, in the sense of we're both a little bit curmudgeonly. And, I always get along real well with those types.
Cool.
But I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're doing the work.
Great.
Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for not only did you find the community that you needed, but you're now the community that others need as well. And And that is so important. It's a recurring theme in all these conversations I'm having.
Right.
I just thank you for doing the work, and I appreciate you taking time today to come out on the weekend and
Cool.
and do an interview. Yeah, thank you so much, Charles.
Thank you.